So now I have to click this. Oh. Listen to my soul song, listen to my heart song, listen to my soul song, listen to my heart song. In the secret in my soul, I will gather blossoms for thee, dipping them in devotion. I will lay them at thy feet. Listen to my soul song, listen to my heart song, listen to my soul song, listen to my heart song. In the secret in my soul, I will gather blossoms for thee, dipping them in devotion. I will lay them at thy feet. Brahmananda Parama Sukhada Kevala Jnanamurti Dandvatita Gagana Sadrisham Tatvama Sayadhi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimala Achala Sarvadi Sakshi Bhuta Bhavatita Triguna Rahitam Sadguru Tam Namami. We begin with a prayer. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, friend, beloved God, great gurus, preceptors, sages of all religions, I humbly bow to you all. Thank you for blessing this class and raising the vibrations of all present. Om Shanti. So mentally, we can say happy birthday to all the teachers lined up there, our line of gurus. Today is Teachers' Day. So last time I was at page 216 and the word Satchidananda came up. So I had said that I'll explain that in detail. Now, most of you may be knowing it, but this was for the benefit of people who are not in the Kriya classes, you know. So it says here, the highest goal, the true bull's eye of devotional focus is not love, but bliss. Love itself is lovable, but it must have a pure motive, and that motive or goal is Satchidananda. So this is what is bliss? Bliss is going several vibrations above love into Satchidananda. So it is impersonal actually. Love has this danger of becoming personal. So true freedom lies in becoming completely impersonal. It is good surely, it is good surely to seek God for his love, but the highest goal of all is ever conscious, ever existing, ever new bliss. So actually it's ever existing. Sat is existence, Chit is ever conscious, and Ananda is bliss. So Master added ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. Traditionally, Satchidananda is simply existence, consciousness, bliss. Master adds the word ever because, he said that it's not static, it's dynamic. That feeling when you have that connection, it's not always the same. It comes in waves. And so it is always new. Even though it is the same, somehow it is always new. Without this as one's goal, even love, if one seeks it as his highest goal, contains the danger of awakening the desire for personal love. True, perfect love is always impersonal, expansive, and ultimately infinite. It has no object save bliss alone. So it is simply enjoying itself. It does not fix on somebody else to love. So that is why it has no object save bliss alone. So bliss goes several vibrations higher than love, and that is what we are aiming for. The true nature of God, or our true nature, if we see ourselves as God, actually that's who we are. We are part of God and therefore we are God. So what is our nature? Our nature is Satchidananda. So Satchidananda is actually at the heart of spirituality. It is the most important concept in spirituality because it is defining the true nature of God. There is this song or shloka, whatever you like to call it, of Jagat Guru Adi Shankaracharya, Nirvana Shatakam. So I will read it out in English so that you know the words. This Adi Shankaracharya, when he was 8 years old, a sage asked him, "Who are you?" And this child answered, "Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham." So I am that ever existing, ever conscious, I am Shiva. So Chidananda, so Chit Ananda Rupa, and Shiv is Sat. So Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. So the whole song goes like this. I am not the mind, the intellect, the ego, or the memory. I am not ears, the skin, the nose, or the eyes. I am not space, nor earth, nor fire, water, or wind. So I'm neither any of the elements. I'm neither the mind, intellect, or ego. I'm neither the outer physical appearance. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. I am not the breath nor the five elements. I am not matter nor the five sheets of consciousness. What are the five sheets of consciousness? We have many, many sheets. So the Annamaya Kosha, the Manamaya Kosha, the Vigyanmaya Kosha. So there are many sheets that we have. So it is saying I am not matter nor the five sheets of consciousness, nor am I the speech, the hands or the feet. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. There is no like or dislike in me, no greed or delusion. I know not pride or jealousy. I have no duty, no desire for wealth, lust, or liberation. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. I am not virtue or vice, nor pleasures or pain. I need no mantras, no pilgrimage, nor scriptures or rituals. I am not the experienced, nor the experience itself. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. So I am beyond subject and object. I have no fear of death, no caste, nor creed. I have no father, no mother, for I was never born. I am not a relative, nor a friend, nor a teacher, nor a learner. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. I am devoid of duality. My form is formlessness. I exist everywhere, pervading all senses. I am neither attached, neither free nor captive. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. So there is a chant of masters, which is a shortened version of this. And I don't know, in the middle, I thought I'll ask Anurupa to learn it and sing it, but I forgot. Do you know how to do that, Anurupa? No.
No,
So
I do, once you remember we did meditate on this song.
yeah,
That was it was beautiful
that was the big one, the long one.
and long one.
Master's version is no birth, no death, no caste have I.
Oh, this
Fa-
one.
Father, mother have
Yeah.
I none. Do you know how to play that?
Yeah, once I sang it in last year, I think Priyanka's batch, you know.
So maybe you play it
Now,
if you like, if you can, if the harmonium is somewhere near. Otherwise, by the end of the class.
yeah, I have to practice.
Oh, you have to practice. So next class.
Because I have next class. Because I
I
have to
didn't warn you. I thought I would.
yeah.
No birth, no death, no caste have I. Father, mother have I none. I am he, I am he. Blessed spirit, I am he. No mind, no intellect, nor ego feeling. Sky, nor earth, nor metals am I. I am he, I am he. Blessed spirit, I am he. So this is this is the nature of God or Satchidananda. So all this, I'm neither this nor that, neither this nor that. What does it mean? It's basically taking us back to source, which is the field of unmanifest possibilities, where everything is present, but nothing is manifest. When does it manifest? It manifests only. So this is Shiva, unmanifest. All the possibilities are there. It starts to manifest with the appearance of Shakti or Prakriti or the feminine principle, which is the vibration of Om. Unless Shiva expends that energy and generates that vibration, creation cannot happen. Everything is inside Shiva. So if Shiva is bored, that's what they said, God wanted to experience himself. To do that, he needed to expend energy, and therefore the vibratory sound of Om came out of that unmanifest reality. And as the vibratory sound started traveling away from source, the vibration started getting lower and lower. As it got lower and lower, it became grosser and grosser. So finally matter was formed. So from source, the causal universe, which is only thought, then comes the astral universe, then comes the physical universe. Astral universe is energy, and the physical universe is the universe where we are. So that is the job of Shakti or Prakriti, to manifest, to create out of the base that Shiva is. Okay, so we know the story of creation. I have repeated it many times. So Shakti is the creative force. The feminine principle in us is the creative force, while the masculine principle in us is the base from which creation springs. Okay. Energy. Energy. So causal, astral, physical. So energy is all the emotions and stuff, feelings. Causal is the thought. Physical is the physical. Okay. So spirit, in order to realize itself, to understand what it was, needed to create what it was not. So the opposite of oneness is duality, one versus many. So it manifested many in the world of duality. What is the world of duality? Black and white, good and bad. The world of relativity came into being because Shiva or source is just one. There is no good, bad, beautiful, ugly, nothing. It is just there as a field of possibility. So, and it manifested its opposite, which is the world of duality. It also manifested its opposite in the sense that if that is neutral, then this world is the world of qualities, which is the gunas. The qualities are sattva, rajas, tamas. So all these kinds of qualities came into being. Definitions, forms, all manner of things which we see, touch, feel, which are perceivable by the five senses. Why did they go through all that complicated thing? Only in order to understand what or who source is by going through what source is not. Because only when we understand the opposite, when we see something just by itself, we don't really understand the full essence of that thing. It's only when we see its opposite that we understand what it is. When we see white, we know what black is. If we just saw black everywhere, we wouldn't know what is the true essence of black. Say, for example, in space, if we see a tall man like Amitabh Bachchan in the middle of nowhere, without a short man placed beside him, we will never understand that he is tall. We will not understand the essence of tallness, shall we say. Okay, so as I said, that Om is the creative principle which creates all the universes. And as it comes further and further from source, it grows grosser and grosser. And so we have matter, gross matter, which is grosser than thought, which is grosser than emotions. Finally, the physical body got manifested. Okay. So when consciousness or self manifests as the little ego, so we are all little egos. So when consciousness starts to manifest as little egos, what happens? Because there is, the more the distance from source, the more layers we build on ourselves. The ego, in its fear, builds many, many defense walls around it. So people who are in the grip of ego, they are very defensive. They are not open. They are not connected to source. Why are they defensive? Because as you move further away from source, the energy of fear becomes very great. Fear is opposite to faith. So people who have a lot of fear energies, to protect themselves, build a lot of defense walls around them. And as they build defense walls around them, they get disconnected from the source that they are. Okay. So say, when we are pure souls, we are most connected to source. Okay. But as we move through lifetimes and strange things happen to us and fearful things happen to us, then we start building defense walls. So we start moving away from source. So one of the defense walls is the persona or the mask self. What is the mask self? Is the face that we present to the world. This is who I am. This is where I live. This is my family. It is a public persona that we will put, the mask self. Then comes the ego. Under the mask, when the politeness is stripped away, we will start seeing the other person's ego self. If we further strip away the ego, we will discover the shadow self, which is the part of us we don't even know exists. It's so deep inside. Shadow self. Below that is the anima and the animus, which is our male, female principles. We all have a male side and a female side to us. Anima, animus. And only when we dissolve this do we finally reach source. So masters are just souls. They are neither male nor female. The gender has disappeared. So we move through all these, and how thick the defense walls are depends on how deep is the fear. So if there is so much fear, there's a lot of resistance to connecting to God or to spirituality. And so the task that we have is through lifetimes to wade through these defense layers and finally connect to our true selves. Okay. So, but the true state of everyone, every atom, every cell is actually the infinite divine bliss. So if we start to understand what is Sat, Satchidananda is the quality of source, who we are. So if we want to understand what is Sat, Sat is the neutral background from which everything arises. Okay, it is completely neutral. It is like the canvas before a painting is made. It is like the ocean and the waves are the ego. It is like, say the intrinsic quality of a metal, say there is gold. Out of the gold, we fashion different ornaments. But the gold remains the same. The gold is just gold. It has no other quality. But out of that, we have created bangles, we have created necklaces, we have created earrings. But the base material is gold. So Sat is that base out of which creation happens through Om. Okay, so say anything which cannot be further divided and cannot be divided into qualities, that is Sat. That is the absolute fundamental from which everything is arising. Another example can be if we are boiling potato in hot water, the potato is hot, but it has taken the heat from the water. The heat is not its intrinsic quality. It takes the heat from the water. The water has taken the heat from the pan, and the pan has taken the heat from the fire. So in this case, the fire is Sat. So you can call it something rather esoteric, like the ground of being. Sat is that from which everything arises. Okay, now what is Chit? Sat, Chit, Ananda. Chit is the feeling quality, the subjective quality. It is all our cellular memories, all our experiences. Because why? Because Sat is present in creation also. According to Sanatan Dharma, God manifested the universe, which means what? That God is present. Unlike Christianity, where God is seen as separate and we are separate, in Sanatan Dharma, Sat pervades the created universe. Every bit of physical matter has the God particle. We have the God essence here at the spiritual eye. We can connect through the spiritual eye. Our physical body, our brain and our nervous system and our spiritual eye helps us to connect to Sat. So therefore, Sat is also present among our consciousness. Chit. Chit is the awareness or the feeling quality or the consciousness with which we understand Sat. Otherwise, it is kind of impossible to understand Sat. So we can realize the easiest way actually to realize ourselves is through our emotions. And that's why Bhakti Yoga is such a powerful path to God. Intellectually, we may understand it, but few of us can connect to God only through the intellect. We actually have to go beyond the intellect into intuition to connect to God. But through our feelings and our emotions, we can, it's much easier to connect to God. So that feeling quality is Chit or consciousness, which we have, right? And through that feeling quality, we can understand the true nature of Sat, which is pure existence. So it is the subjective quality. If we get too, too dry and too intellectualize it, if we don't feel another, see it from this perspective, if I just know you as a name, a age, a physical structure, this is who this person is. It's a very dry knowing. But if I know you in your emotions, if I connect to you as a person with my feelings, then my experience of you becomes far more real to me. So that is why it is said that Bhakti Yoga is a very, very powerful path. But of course, you must have that quality of feeling in your heart. So we all feel love to some degree or the other, depending on who we are, how deeply we feel. Now, even the deepest degree of human love needs to be multiplied, I think, 1,000 times to connect to God. See, human love is a vibratory frequency. You keep raising the frequency, and you will reach divine love. Love can be of many kinds. So what is a frequency? There is often a confusion that what is a frequency and what is a vibration is very, people use it in a interchangeable way. So say this is a vibration of love, divine love, if you like. Now, the frequency is the bands within it. Layers of the vibration is the frequency. So say codependent love that we have in the world, the unhealthy kind, the energy draining kind, that kind of love, we can call it love, that kind of love has a low frequency within the vibration of love. From there, we can move up the frequency in the vibration of love. Say it becomes a healthy relationship in love where there is equal give and take, nobody is dragging the other. From there, we move up to unconditional love of a mother and a child. From there, several frequencies up, if we keep raising that vibration, we will reach the essence of divine love. So to understand what is divine love, it is a good practice to go back to any time that you have loved someone really and to move the vibration 1,000 times more. That is the kind of energy it needs to feel divine love. Just see whatever you feel, just raise it, even 10,000 times more. Then you will reach the frequency of divine love. But it is the easiest one rather than the Jnana Yoga variety where it is very dry and you are just trying to intellectually understand and shift your mindset, or the Raja Yoga, which is our path, which is the meditative path. For years you are practicing to reach that vibration. Of course, our path includes all the four, through service, through meditation, through bhakti, and through jnana. All four. So chit is that feeling quality, is that consciousness, is the subjective quality which enables us to understand Sat. And what is Ananda? Ananda is bliss, happiness. We can all experience happiness to some extent. Again, it depends on who we are, to the depth or height at which we can experience happiness also. If there are too many defense layers and we are separated from source, we don't feel too much happiness, no matter what is happening. And if our defense layers are very little, if it is thin, then even a sunrise or a dewdrop on a leaf will transport us to happiness. We don't need too much of, stimulation to feel happiness. We generally feel happy, right? So people who numb themselves very much, gradually they realize they need more and more push to even feel alive or happy. So they'll need many, many stimulations to be able to feel a certain feeling. Right? So Ananda is bliss and happiness. We can all experience happiness to some extent. And our unhappiness comes from a sense of limitation. Somewhere the ego does know that it is unlimited, but so therefore it starts to feel caged. We feel unhappy when we say that, we have a limited self, I will die, the people I love will also die. And but the ananda or the bliss comes when we connect to the sense of infinity that Sat is. It happens in meditation. Suddenly something shifts and you will actually understand that the witness, the doer, and what is being done simply collapse into one, and you realize that I am God. It is an incredible experience which will bring you such a feeling of unlimitedness. Suddenly, your consciousness expands, and in that expansion is Ananda or bliss. So, Satchidananda, this is the quality of the universe. This is the heart of spirituality. All of Vedanta is trying to bring us to this understanding that you are that. Tvatvam asi. Thou art that. You are actually Satchidananda. So great masters who are always in Nirvikalpa Samadhi are Satchidananda. They are, in fact, embodying Satchidananda. So Swamiji says of Master that Yogananda was Satchidananda personified. So Kriyananda writes, he was, in a deeply real sense, everything. Completely human, loving, charmingly so, in the highest and fullest possible sense, the highest potential a human being can reach. Yet he was forever at rest in the eternal self within. If you looked into his eyes, you could connect with the vast, impersonal infinite, the only reality there is. He was always connected to source in perpetual Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Nothing could define him, for he had transcended all definition and swam blissfully in Satchidananda, the ocean of perfect divine immortality. So that is our true nature. Our true nature is also Satchidananda, and over the so many millions of lifetimes, that is where we are moving towards real. That is known as self-realization. The day you understand and the day you connect to that bliss, then you can be called self-realized because you have connected to your God self. So I'll move on in the Gita. The ignorant, the person who lacks devotion, the doubt-ridden, all these must perish. The man of vacillating temperament finds no happiness in this world or the next. For him, supreme bliss is impossible. So what is devotion? Devotion is the ability to realize that there is something far, far, far greater than I am. And that brings a natural reverence, and that brings a natural love that I want to reach that. And so I have a lot of devotion. Only if I feel that I am the greatest and beyond human life, there cannot be anything, and I don't respect anything that is beyond my understanding. Some people intuitively don't understand that there is something much greater, something huge that is behind the veil or behind the scenes that is directing everything in the world. So if we don't understand that, then it will be very, very difficult for us to have any kind of realization. We will remain in the material world. We will not go beyond it because we only believe our five senses. Whatever we can perceive through the five senses is real for us, nothing else is. And no matter, even if you tell such people that even a cat and a dog has sharper vision and hearing than you have. So just because you cannot hear what a dog is hearing much further away, does it mean it doesn't exist? But there, of course, is a time for people to realize these things. We cannot really force that. The man of vacillating temperament finds no happiness in this world or the next. What is vacillating temperament? There's a lot of doubts. One day he feels God exists, the next day he loses faith, he feels God doesn't exist. So he is unsure. So there is a lot of, instability in such a person. And that person, for him to even begin to understand bliss is quite impossible. To be truly ignorant is to reject with a dull heart any offer of a way out of the mud flats of nescience. The truly ignorant, being dull-minded, ask no questions of life and recognize no opportunity for improvement, even if it offers them everything. They are so low and so depressed. Oh, nothing will happen. What's the point? I'm not going to, even invest energy to try and understand if there can be something better than what I am experiencing right now. The energy is very low. So such people are tamasic. It's difficult to raise them, for them to come for classes, for them to do spiritual practices, for them to even try and understand what the scriptures are saying. They have no interest because the energy is very low. They just cannot be bothered. Worse than being ignorant is the inability to feel devotion. High aspiration eludes such a person. Aspiration of any kind indeed seems to him foolish and unnecessary. To what, he asks, is there to aspire? Why strive for anything? The less energy he expends, he knows, the less energy will life demand of him, the fewer challenges it will throw in his way, and the more, in consequence, he will be left alone. So the energy is so low, there is even no desire to connect to anything. Just leave me in my misery and I'm done. How can those not ultimately perish who, buffalo-like, insist on wallowing in the mud of a passive contentment? Stupidity, sloth, lack of any vital interest in anything. How can people who cling to such mental sluggishness expect the mechanism of their life not to run down very quickly? They refuse it even the proper maintenance. So some people, they don't care. They will eat anything, they will drink anything, they will sleep most of the time. They are in complete tamas. So they may be alcoholics, they may be drug addicts. What's the point? It's useless to even try and get out of this. This has become their comfort zone. So for them to wake up to anything greater or to aspire to anything is very difficult. That's because the vibration is very low. The energy is very, very low. The worst case, however, is that of the confirmed doubter. He has all the equipment he needs to rise to the heights, yet his compulsion is to keep listing all the shortcomings, the drawbacks, and the mischief by which others might try to undo him. He has the devotion and the desire to rise to the heights, yet a cynical inner voice keeps whispering in his subconscious. What will the end be? Treachery, lack of appreciation, opposition, ingratitude. So there are people who, in spite of having all the brains, all the desire, they have the aspiration, but suddenly this doubt comes. What is the doubt? The doubt is the very strong egoic presence. It's the ego whose primary agenda is to keep you away from source. So when the ego kicks in, then such an intelligent person who has all the resources, they will start questioning, is it for real? I wonder what will happen. I'll believe in this, and after 10 years, I'll see it has led me down a wrong path. So there, apart from tamasic people, the doubters face a lot of trouble. Paramahansa Yogananda once commented, the doubter is the most miserable of mortals. He was referring not to constructive questioning, but to the nagging tendency to oppose every constructive idea, to prejudge the idea for no real reason at all, and to be negatively prejudiced against everything wholesome or constructive. It can't be right, therefore it isn't right. It can't work. Therefore, no matter what happens, it can't really work, not even if it seems to be doing so. So people like this will kill an idea. They will not move further. They will not experiment. That doubt comes in and stops everything. People can't know what they are doing. Therefore, they must be wrong. To doubt a true teacher, especially if one is his disciple, owing to arrogance or simply to a habit of mental rejection, causes seething turmoil in the mind. One assumes dejectedly that whatever the Guru says must automatically be wrong, not because one has checked it out, nor even because he wants to disbelieve a conclusion that is merely inconvenient for him, and not because he doubts the Guru's motives. So, Swami Kriyananda was also quite a doubter before. Till he met Master, people who are very, very intellectual, they tend to have all this mental chatter. They tend to have more of the self-doubt rather than a simple faith. So what the intellect does is it gets lost in the trees. It misses the woods for the trees. It'll go into some narrow byway. It'll start questioning one thing. So the intellect dissects. It cannot see the whole. It sees in parts, and it goes into such details that it gets lost. However, if the intuition is awake, you will be able to see the big picture. You will not say, but this book contradicts this book. And that book, many people in class also get confused. This is it's not. You just have to move up and see it from a higher perspective. All the books, all the spiritual books are saying the same thing. But if you are going to get stuck, in one channel or in a little bit of it, instead of seeing the whole thing, then all kinds of doubt starts coming. The doubter deeply desires something true in life and cannot accept what he finds, because it is there, it's a belief that it can't be. It's too good to be true, or it's too easy. No, there must be something wrong here. So the doubter is desiring something true in life, but cannot accept what he finds. A strange twist of mind rejects, not out of disinterest, but rather out of intense interest. His doubt is born of almost a fear of finding himself deluded in the end, when he wanted so much to be sure. So this is a quality of a person typically who's mostly in the head. Too much of mind chatter, too much of, questioning, too much of analyzing, instead of directly perceiving the truth. It is a fear energy, just in case I'm deluded. So it's a form of fear. Were he indifferent, his condition might be better, at least in the sense that he'd then be able to direct his interest elsewhere. The tragedy for him is that he desires, his whole being yearns for the very truths which subconscious habit impels him to reject. So these are subconscious habits, belief systems that the world is not to be trusted, nothing great will ever come of this world. These kind of very deeply held beliefs create a doubter. That habit proposes no acceptable alternative. It simply shakes his head and says no. The truths he wants, so that habit tells him cannot possibly exist. So by habit, he thinks, no, true love cannot exist. God cannot exist. True devotion cannot exist. Why? Because he's afraid of being deluded. So he doesn't want to be vulnerable, and he's putting up more and more walls and becoming more and more miserable. The habit gives no reason. Darkly instead, it poses the dire warning. What if? What if this happens? What if that happens? So it's basically a lack of faith. What if all this should prove in the end to be chicanery? What if my guru's motives be not so generous as they seem, and all he really wants is somehow to squeeze others for his own benefit? Such doubts quickly develop a life of their own and create for themselves an alternate universe. What if everything? One's willpower becomes paralyzed, hope withers away to become in time a dry twig. The sweetness of friendship is soured by suspicion. So these people, doubters, are so afraid. Hi, Savita, welcome.
Hey, hey.
We just finished the Gita, then we'll go into meditation. Okay, so the sweetness of friendship is soured by suspicion. Okay, so doubt is nothing but another fear energy. And if we lack faith, then we will always fall into this kind of problem. Okay, so we end today over here. See you next week. The people who are Kriyavans, please remain for long meditation. The others, we end with a prayer. Divine Mother, thou art omnipresent. Thou art in all thy children. Manifest thy healing power in all bodies, minds, and souls. Let's rub our hands together and send the healing energy to the universe. Om. 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 Shanti, Shanti. So see you next week, and Kriyabans, please stay back.